Watch Hope More with host Hope Demps on the Daily Gospel Network, the television show created to inspire, encourage, and motivate. Each week, we will provide a dose of entertainment, social commentary, and spiritual insight. This is your opportunity to gain a better understanding of current and important topics from a refreshing perspective, plus creative art, new foods, travel, event reviews, do-it-yourself projects, awesome guests, and so much more. Catch Hope More with host Hope Demps every week on the Daily Gospel Network.
Hello, my Facebook family. I know I'm coming on much later than I had planned, but I wanted to talk about this very important issue. So regardless of when I put it in the ether, I just wanted to make sure that I got on to share some really important things regarding dangers that even hurricane relief efforts can cause unexpectedly to families, causing great destruction. And I wanted to talk about it now because we are now over 7 days in of the aftermath of Hurricane Idalia here in the Big Bend area. And if one person can hear this information and maybe make different decisions and it saves a life, or it helps a family to avoid the pitfalls and the trouble, then that's one family enough to basically prompt me to do this show, regardless of the fact that it's coming on much later than expected. I think I'm going to mute one of these, hopefully, so you can still hear me, but without the background. So I need you to go ahead right now, share, and like this particular show. Share in group pages. I know there's a number of group pages of people who are involved with hurricane relief. So make sure if you can share it, go ahead and share it. Share it on your page. Share it with your church family. We are going to be talking about something that's really, really important. And unfortunately, it's really, really sad. And it's dealing with when relief efforts endanger and destroy more than the storm itself. And it's a part of my Dear Florida, Oh Florida series. And it became this poetic outcry as I see so many things that are happening, particularly to the Big Bend area, my home, both through natural disaster and man-made accidents that have caused like much more grief than originally imagined. And I just want to make sure that the other side of hurricane relief is considered. Like, why and how do we use a generator? When you evacuate, are there certain things you should consider? You leaving your home where there's maybe locked cabinets for guns and your prescription pills are placed in high potential places so children can't get in it. You know, you're baby proof, the electrical socket. There's all these things that are available that when you evacuate due to a storm, you pile the people in a car, many times multi-generationally, and now they're all together. So whatever you have is all together. And then a tragic loss can happen because you're focused on the evacuation, and maybe in evacuating that safe home, you also leave the safeguards that you also had in place for that home. So I need you to come on, share, and watch now. It may not be for you, it may be for someone else, or maybe for you to consider in our next storm. But I wanted to talk about this very true situation on the other side of relief efforts, that there often are some dangers and destructive situations that could really hurt you more than the storm you're trying to get relief from, or you're trying to be rescued from, or you're trying to evacuate from. So I know I ended the sentence with a preposition, but that's okay. We want to talk about the other side of hurricane relief efforts. So please come on. And I know that being from a small town where everyone knows each other, some of this could be very sensitive to discuss. So I want to be very, 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 very sensitive in discussing it. But I think one of the most telling things about how dangerous it can be on the other side of hurricane relief efforts. We don't have to go any further than, I believe, 2005 Hurricane Katrina, especially in the New Orleans area. People who had money evacuated for the most part pretty early. It was those who did not have money or did not have any preparation and and process that ended up finding themselves at the Superdome for safety. They were escaping flooding and wind torn buildings throughout New Orleans, but they all were hauled up and held up in a big facility that protected them from losing their life from the winds and the rain of the hurricane, but there was still destruction that happened. Um, so I think for me, even just looking at some of that footage, I think Spike Lee has this documentary called "When the Levees Broke," and and that's a really really amazing documentary because you realize it wasn't the hurricane itself that caused a lot of death, even though death did come because the hurricane came quickly and ferociously, but often it was the aftermath. It's when the levees did not hold all the water that was keeping New Orleans dry and barely above sea level, or it wasn't above sea level, but keeping it safe. When those levees broke because they had not been maintained like they were supposed to, it was the flooding that killed people. And if you ever have an opportunity to watch any of the documentary about some of the hospitals during that time, what they had to do to survive, there's a particularly interesting show on Apple TV that and I'm gonna get the name of it because it was really, oh my god, to watch it really gave me a greater insight on just the idea of disaster relief. And we so often in this civilized American society where we see our men and women and in the armed forces go to other countries and like throw themselves head first in helping rescue people in war-torn countries. So we can't imagine that our neighborhood, our city, our county, our state in dire need, not having the same access or in a way that we feel is immediate and timely. So we can sometimes, like those poor residents who went to the Superdome, expect that rescue is going to come after they took this route to evacuate or to be relieved. But if you look at even the documentaries, not just movies, of how a lot of these hospitals that are used to emergencies, used to urgent situations, they were left having to fend for themselves and use the connections that they had in order to get relief for their patients. And this particular series, and I know they're not the only one. You may have heard, and it sounds almost amazing to repeat, but there were nursing homes that residents died, and there were investigations where they left alone because when the lights are going out and you're on a ventilator or you're on oxygen, what do you do? Even if you have a generator, it only will last for so long. So the particular show um, that I watched was so really heartbreaking because it was based on a true story. But this, depending on who you might believe, either um, what's the word, maliciously or neglectfully, there was decisions made as to who would get um, the treatment needed to continue and who possibly receive extreme palliative, I think is what they call it, care to remove pain that led to possibly premature death to keep the people from suffering in the heat without any real understanding of how close any rescue really was to the hospital and the facility. So there are people who died naturally or people who died because of the lack of access to working machines, but there are people whose death was hastened in a way that was considered for some arguably to be benevolent type of care to cause them to be comfortable and without pain, but to no longer live. And so those are just, those are really extreme situations of typical not typical. Those are extreme situations where man made decisions that what was considered relief, going to a hospital, end up causing more destruction or heartache in that family than what it actually was taken away by the storm itself. So we have some unfortunate examples right here in the Big Bend area in my small hometown. And again, I know this is a sensitive topic because we are neighbors. We're not just numbers. I'm here in Perry. We're less than 8,000 citizens in Perry, which is the county seat. I believe all of Taylor County is about 25,000 people. So it's hard to throw a rock without hitting a relative or someone you care about. So I want to be very, very cautious in what I share. As you saw in the advertisement, I'll start with during the Hurricane Michael situation that happened a few years ago. There was literally a homeless man in the same shelter as many of the families who were fleeing and was accused of molesting a 6-year-old that was in that same shelter. Talking about a relief effort that endangered and destroyed that family or that child, at least more than the storm itself. Talk about a person who went to a place of refuge and shelter and then became a victim of the other riffraff in the shelter. That is a prime example of one. And we heard about it during Hurricane Katrina. There are people who even during not just that hurricane but subsequent hurricanes would criticize different churches like Joel Osteen in Houston, Texas, and say, why won't you open up your church for hurricane disaster relief? And one of the truth situation is, like, if you have a building that's understaffed and you have families living in there, you arguably could become liable even if you're never placed in a lawsuit, but you can lose your reputation with people being hurt. I mean, the Superdome was attributed in some ways the fallacies to the city government, and that mayor never was the same, but it's not attached the same way as, say, Pastor Leroy at the so and so Baptist church having people in there and someone rape a 6-year-old. That church may never recover from just the stigma of what tragically happened in that church. So that case or that situation during Hurricane Michael is a sad example of how relief efforts endangered and destroyed that 6-year-old and that family more than the storm itself. They were evacuating to get away from danger, but went right dead head front into a place of danger. So I wanted to, share that example. But one example that really, really also, you know, got my heart beating, and I wasn't a lot done in the news about it, but I did hear about it actually before it was reported on the same day. But here we have, and it's in our Friday, Saturday newspaper. Shout out to Aaron Portwood and Perry's News Herald that on the front cover, both of the other stories I was going to cover as an example of when relief efforts endanger and destroy more than the storm itself, are these two stories of people's families who have been devastated after the hurricane has left or during the hurricane relief or rescue efforts or evacuation efforts. Here we have a 14-year-old named Keon, Kevin Kevon Bolden, 14 years old. He was accidentally shot and killed by his younger brother, who I believe is 8 years old, the early morning of Friday, September the 1st. His family had actually evacuated Perry, Florida. And I could imagine there's people of different ages. And apparently, where he would not normally have access to a gun, this younger brother, he now had access. And like I said, at your home, you may have the safeguards of a key entry lock only on your firearms as well as your medicines. But now you're all in one hotel room just trying to be safe. And someone who should not gets a hold of a firearm and discharges it, and now the family has to deal with the death of their beloved freshman. And I was just thinking about how awful it is. It wasn't an accident, but how this children and this family has forever changed. Now I don't know if their home back here in Perry had been destroyed by storm. I hadn't heard a follow up about that. But I could imagine that that mother would take a destroyed home that could be replaced through insurance or FEMA over the death and the loss of her child any day. Any day. It's just no comparison. And you can find more stories about that at WCTV as well. So it's on the front page of Perry's News Herald. Now, another aspect of relief efforts that can destroy and endanger more than the storm itself is the unfortunate situation dealing with the Blankenship family. A generator that's used to keep the energy on, probably keep the air conditioner running, keep things in the refrigerator cool that this family used end up catching fire and destroying the home. Destroying the home. I believe that was on September the 6th. So several days after the hurricane, this generator that was supposed to provide relief ended up, you know, being set ablaze, I think by natural causes, and then destroying the home. The particular generation, the house was surrounded by broken pines and oak trees that spared the residents mostly during the hurricane, but it was the burning, consuming fire ignited by the generator on the porch while power crews worked on electrical lines nearby that actually ended up torching the residents of Jimmy and Tambra Blankenship's home. So my heart goes out to them, and um, you never know what could happen or what better you can do. But one thing I would encourage everyone as you look to the very practical relief effort of using a generator, know how to use your generator, be aware of the hazards, get educated, look at it as a potential weapon of destruction, and your family is not held well, not so that you don't, not so that you're psyched out and full of anxiety, but so you have, you know, a sense of how to run it, that it doesn't end up doing something that's more damaging to your home. I think about the beautiful husband and wife York family some years ago, that a generator, and I don't want to get the information incorrect, but the generator ended up producing carbon monoxide as they do, and it leaked into the home, and so they both died in their sleep. Just imagine, it's the equivalent of going into a garage and turning on your car and just sitting there and letting the carbon monoxide basically take your life. But this was also accidental, and I know for this reason alone, my father had us without a generator, and I was this close to getting him to agree to get one when he's like, nope. Now that we have his friends example where they died or asphyxiated on carbon monoxide, and now on the 6th, several days after a hurricane, you have a home that has now gone up in flames. I don't know if we're going to get around to that generator, but I'm hoping we do, both because my father and I'm trying to become more knowledgeable. I believe we'll use it safely, or as safe as possible. But again, they were trying to get relief undoubtedly from the heat, from the loss of food, from things being defrosting in a hot house that doesn't have power. They were looking for relief, and they were met with destruction. But unlike the first story and the second story, there was no physical harm, I understand, that came to any of the residents. So that is a really, really great thing. Um, that, you know, they got out with their lives, but I know that their heart must be broken about all the things that they miss, um or they will miss, because now their home is burnt, and I believe just, you know, a pile of ashes. And that is relief that has actually endangered or destroyed their home more than the storm ever could. There's some other tidbits that I want to share with you that I think are just very helpful regarding things to consider during natural disasters, particularly as it relates to wind, water, flooding type of disasters. And the information I'm sharing with you is available on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website. You can look under natural disasters and severe weather. But to stay safe during a hurricane, not only do you need to evacuate when told, and I realize, even having been a part of a family that chose not to evacuate, I don't think I appreciated how dangerous the storm will come and land. But once you make a decision to stick and stay or to leave, you need to be thinking how and what other things and considerations should I measure or plan for or prepare for in the event that things don't go the way we hope it goes. Because the Blankenship family with their generator never thought it would go end up or result in their home burning down. But you need to think about it. So one of the things we know, especially in North Florida, we've dealt with in different counties like Lafayette County, particularly in our Steam Hatchery roads, they says always follow the warning signs about flooded roads and don't drive in the flooded areas. I don't care if you have a big wheel or 4x4, four drive, whatever. That stuff that makes you want to mud bog and go up mountains backwards is that don't play with floodwaters. They can like take your butt on. They can sweep you away while you may be stalling in moving water. If you have to be in floating water, wear a life jacket, especially if the water is rising. Wash your hands with soap and water if you've been in flood water. Use sanitizers. You don't know what is in that water. You don't know. I mean, the same thing that's carrying in the cars and carrying the boats is carrying food, is carrying sewer matter, if you know what I mean. So you need to be careful and keep your hands clean where possible. Use sanitizer if you need to, because there's things in floodwaters, germs, chemicals, human waste, livestock waste that really can make you sick. Now, never use a wet electrical device. You may want to turn off the power at the main breaker in your house if the device is still plugged in. Wait for an electrician to check the device before using it. So if you find yourself with a wet electrical device, then just like leave it alone, basically. And if it's connected still to like your power supply, you may want to turn the power at the main breaker off. Um, Now, if the power's out, they say use a flashlight instead of candles. And I know for me, we use both. But even in my small bungalow, when my parents came over to stay with me, we had way more candles than we had flashlights. And dad even had the cool flashlight that opened up like a lantern, but it was only emitting so much light. Um, and um, when I end up having to get ready for a big day, um, and I needed Wi-Fi and I need just a moment of coolness. And I tried to get my parents to come with me, but they wouldn't. I left them at the house. The one thing I went through and I tried to eliminate the proliferation of candles because I was so afraid that my mom was going to grab something, trying to hold herself up and knock a candle over. And then we would have worse situations. So we opted, I think, to put the lantern light in the bathroom because that's where um, there's most likely some type of grabbing of something. Um, but you have to be mindful. So please use flashlights instead of candles. And I know for me, we use both, but it made me nervous when I wasn't around just because all it takes is one candle or one fire source to destroy a building. Keep a fire extinguisher handy and make sure you know how to use it. How many of you have fire extinguishers and you don't know how to use it? I mean, I feel like I can pull on the tab that it notes and aim it, but you know, maybe I need to take a safety class where I get to actually um, sort of execute the whole use of a fire extinguisher. Um, and that's really really important. Again, prevent carbon monoxide poisoning, and the equipment like generators that have gas, pressure washers, charcoal grills, and camp stoves. You can't smell or see carbon monoxide. That's why it makes it so dangerous. But if it builds up in your home, you can have sudden illness and death, like the York family with their generator. So you need to keep those things outside at least 20 feet from any window, door, and vent. And I understand that if you're in a wooden house, you got to be careful because the carbon dioxide could seep underneath the floor panelings up throughout the house and cause great destruction. Now, be careful about being near damaged buildings. Don't enter them until the local authorities say they're safe. I don't care how much you got going on in the buildings. You need to have a local authority come with you, or like, be stay in touch with you when you've passed like your medical conditions, or had them reviewed, and it's okay for you to be there to do what you can do to help. And I remind yourself that hurricane damage is not always noticeable. Like with your roof, so many people are getting their roof repairs because when there's 120 miles per hour winds whooping through the streets of your neighborhood, most likely there's been some shaking of your roof. So look for shingles, look for opportunities to connect with that guy. He may be very helpful. I'm still looking over the paperwork, so read the paperwork. Um, if you hear inside your house that there's shifting noises, you need to leave. And what's amazing, since I've been back, or since the storm has been over, I'm always hearing noises. But I have been attributing to the, like, oh, the air condition, kicking in, or the ice maker. But I will be more mindful regarding these noises because I don't want to also be vulnerable to something that could suggest that the building is about to fall. um, Stay away from power lines. Watch for fallen ones. I know there's a lot of fallen power lines around this area, and stay clear of them. I mean, I know that's not rocket scientist, but it is really just like that. Like, just stay clear of them. Learn how to protect yourself, which you guys already seem to have a really good grasp on. So here's a little tidbit, and I'm not gonna stay long here, about protecting yourself from animals and pests. I know all throughout this weekend, or this past week, I've sprayed more DEET um repellent on my skin than I ever have, and I sometimes I'm itching, but you know what? I'd rather just itch from that, particular spray than from ants or bug bites. In order to get the most out of your time, you should stay away from wild or stray animals after a storm. We'll call 911, and I believe you did call 911, so the public health department can report them and actually come take them away. That's what we want, them to take them away. I don't know that any of this is like, oh, I can't wait to get rid of those, because the leader is so humble and want to be used by God. So remember to drink safe water, eat safe food. That sounds really redundant. And it's amazing when food is scarce, how people who are used to just sort of like, I don't know, get their way no matter the complexity of what's happening with the rest of the congregation. They may be like, oh, that's crazy. There's a plate, I'm gonna get it. Whereas I feel like so grateful to be a part of a huge legacy of women in ministry that is who prayed for me, prayed for this time to come. That is like, it's not all about me, and I just wish they were down here in the natural to see it come to fruition. Um, so here's a bunch of other stuff. Make sure you listen to the report of local authorities. Don't use contaminated water that you've used for washing your clothes or the baby cleaning, and I think that's pretty common sense. What I wanted to end my time here today with is something that I think all of us need to consider, because although it may not be a physical wound, the mental and emotional wounds that could come through storms are tremendous, and it's not always discernible based on the kind of damage or catastrophic situations that the person could be in. Um, it could be based in complex triggering about being alone. Or I spoke to one of the ladies at the Women's Imaging Center, and she said that when she was 6 years old, she had decided to go sleep in her parents' bed, and a tree ended up falling through her room on the second floor, where she would have been. Now she was totally safe, and now she's in her 40s, and it's still triggering when she comes upon trees in the yard, or she thinks about her own children. It's triggering because that storm, although it did not touch and harm her physically, it made her feel like at any given time a tree can fall and find myself in its path and lose my life. And I just thought, whoa, like that is you're not the only one who feels that way. And I don't that certain cases are more severe than others, but I do think that, Mika's on her way to wanting to learn more and know more. I mean, not just do more. So okay. So, did I just, yes. So, besides, those things that we've talked about, I want you to take care of your mental and emotional health. And can we check on our neighbors for that? I mean, have weak upper body strength, so I can't offer like major cleanup, even though I have done some debris removal, or should I say, from one area to the other, transference at my parents' property because I wanted an easier path to drive my car. But I'm not the one to call on to do that. But you know what I am good about? Encouraging people. You know what I am good about? Asking people how are they doing for real, for real. What I am great at is discerning when someone is feeling low and isolated, and having God really download what's going on so that I can speak and encourage them. So we really need to seek um, coping mechanisms regarding our feelings, because sometimes this stuff brings up very strong emotions. Or like I talked to a friend tonight, she was already going through stuff, and this storm has only made it more obvious or worse that it needs to be dealt with. And my prayer is that if that's the case, maybe someone who may have benefited from going to grief counseling some years ago now is prompted and pushed over to going because they see the benefit in their congregation or with their friends or even in their own lives. And so I'm excited about that. So connect with your family, friends, and others in your community. Take care of yourself and each other, and know when and how to seek help. And so even during the the meal distribution that Christian Tabernacle has been doing, that's been so fabulous this week, with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, outside of people just coming to get their food, which is outfitted for that. Like there's no tables and chairs, but we do have majority walking traffic. So there's a big old opening right there in front, and people will socialize and talk and come over and talk to my mom and dad, the pastors Chester and Carolyn Dimps. And what I just think about is how, like, just getting out of your house. It wasn't a meal for some of them that was so appreciative. It was just that someone cared enough to invite them, for them to say thank you and have interaction. So if you're already dealing with isolation before the storm, it was really hard during the storm, and you could be gun shy and coming out after the storm. But I promise you, one of the biggest ways of shaking isolation is getting outside of yourself. And sometimes the only way you can get outside of yourself is to move your body, whether it's to go walking or move your body to take your books and what you need to a library just for a different atmosphere. Just get up and out. Get up and out. It almost is a physical exercise that gets to your emotions. Like, we got to check on each other. And you know what? And check on the strong people, because often the strong person is already dealing with one or two, three people. But during a storm, those one or two, three people who depend on him are now trying to help other people. So exponentially, that load is getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And when you're used to like being in charge, it can sometimes be hard to ask for help. But please ask for help. Please ask for help. So this is Hope Moore. I love you and I mean it. And I just wanted to touch bases about the other side of relief efforts. I know there's plenty of resources out there, but please be mindful of the people who are mindful of us. And like, so when when you hear Brandon with the art at food court, or Antoinette with her Caribbean tally truck, say a prayer, believe God for their refreshing, because they've been such an addition to us. Um, so that being said, I'm gonna call it a night. And now I know that you're watching on replay, since there's been no viewers in my setting this show 3 times. And so if you are a queen or a current title holder, or been in a pageant before, and you would like to participate and come to the reception, as well as maybe be a studio audience member, feel free to inbox me at Hope Demps. That's DEMPS. Hope Demps on Facebook Messenger, and I'll make sure that you get what you need. Okay, and that goes not just for her, that goes for everyone. If there's something you want to put in my ear or talk a little bit about, please feel free to do that at any time. Even late night. If Ward Catching, for instance, is calling me 3 o'clock in the morning, I know it's serious. So I'm not really concerned about you getting too many calls or all that kind of stuff. I'm more concerned that people who are already weary from the escape, who are looking to being relieved, now seems worse off for the wear. But it may not be, because maybe that's just the ball rolling to help clear titles for a number of families that started with a nuisance call to the sheriff's office or the police saying this lady is being loud and rambunctious. It was never supposed to be like a property dispute thing. We just happened to find that where her property line was not where she was, and she was all over in our property. So that's neither here nor there. We love everyone on here. Thank you so much. Those of you watching in replay, thank you so much. And I'm going to get this stuff down, but I just want to thank you, and I want to close out in prayer. Father, in Jesus' name, I lift up the Blankenship family and the Blaylock family, and I ask God that you give them peace that passes all understanding. I add my prayers to them in Jesus' name. I thank you that no weapon formed against them shall prosper. All that rise up against them shall fall. I thank you, God, that 1,000 may fall by my side and 10,000 by my right hand, but it shall not come near me. Lord, I thank you that you've graced Monique to be an amazing educator, and Lord, may it rub off on the people who seemingly are having challenges. I just thank you for it, oh God. And I just bless you for it, Lord. I thank you, Lord God, for even opportunities that you have, that you see something in me, that you always have the freedom. My prayers that you would always have the freedom to just share it, because I know I benefit from your consecration as well. So yeah, so I just I just want to pray that God would do that, that God would answer and hear prayers, and like Job, that Job prayed for his friends in the midst of his situation, and God blessed him. So whether it's in this prayer or volunteerism throughout the city, I pray that those who may feel the most impacted would take a moment and maybe volunteer and be concerned about other people, and they may be amazed at the quick response that God has. As we are faithful in helping other people's vineyards, he will look after our own. So, Lord, I pray for the Blaylock family, for the death of their son. Lord, I pray that you cover that whole situation with your blood. I pray for his mother and his other siblings, and just his relatives, God. I pray that they would just be prepared, God, for what is to come. And I just thank you right now for touching that family in Jesus' name. I love you, Lord, and we'll give your name the praise, the glory, and the honor in Jesus' name. Amen. Dear Florida, oh Florida, the other side, when relief efforts endanger and destroy you more than the storm ever could. So, if you evacuate or you stay, make sure you stay prayed up so you have your internal charging to be able to extend yourself um, to several days of ministry. So I bless the Lord, and I will talk to you soon. Bye bye.